Houston Real Estate Radio.
Welcome back. You are listening to Houston Real Estate Radio, and today I'm talking with you about real estate information that you can use. If you have a question you'd like answered, you can tweet us on Twitter. Send us your question using hashtag HRER, and you can listen for your answers on Sundays from 2 to 3 p.m. That's when we'll answer the previous week's questions. So today I have Mike Brubaker here with us on the show, and we've been discussing his specialty, which is appraisals, and a lot of interesting things going on with appraisals these days. We were talking before the last segment ended a little bit about the process for when an appraisal comes in low, and just want to clarify that with a cash purchase, you can get an appraisal or not get an appraisal. But when a lender is involved, the lender is going to order their own appraisal. So when I say an appraisal came in low, I'm talking about a lender-ordered appraisal that comes in low. So Mike, walk us through the process. If you're a buyer and the house that you want just got appraised lower than the sales price, what do? What's that process?
You know, there's an appeals process. And again, I think we mentioned earlier that I've not really found it very satisfactory. Basically what the lender's going to want, and whoever, this could be realtors involved in the transaction, can be buyers, can be sellers, provide us more information that you think will help support your opinion of value, whatever this higher value is. And generally that comes down to give us comparable sales. Well, an awful lot of buyers and sellers really aren't privy to that kind of information. They can get listings off of HAR.com, those sorts of sources, but sales prices aren't available to the public. So they're really limited to, and unfortunately, appraisers are stuck with using sales. Listings and rumors kind of don't count. So it puts everybody at a disadvantage. It really does. So the appeal process is sort of ugly. It's not very satisfactory. It doesn't work very well.
Do you think that there's anything that can change it? Do you see anything in the works to kind of fix it? Or how are we going to get through this problem that we're having in the industry? We kind of went from lending issues to appraisal issues. What are we going to do to fix it, do you think?
Well, I think all the issues, when people ask me, said, what's the number one appraisal problem? I say it's underwriting. Underwriting right now is very, very strict. Most lenders have sort of, because of the subprime crisis that everybody's heard about, and this has happened for years and years and years, everybody overcorrects. We have a crisis, let's overcorrect. So, I mentioned appraisers in the state of Texas, well, in all states now, are licensed and or certified. That was as a result of a housing crisis back in the 80s, and I think most of us Houstonians that were here then will remember that. Everybody decided that the appraisers didn't have enough qualifications, and that was the source of that problem. So now we have certification. I will tell you that we have overcorrected as an industry, as a lending industry. We've overcorrected to be very, very conservative. It will correct back. That pendulum is really very heavy, but it will swing back to the middle. And what you'll find is all of a sudden, underwriting issues will become less of a concern. The appraisals will become less of a concern. Lenders will start to look for appraisals quicker, faster, cheaper, which means a lower quality product. And that will happen. It's going to take time, though.
What do you think about, the appraisals right now are a specific number, and it's an opinion. It's based on a lot of data, and so, we all know that data can be kind of skewed whichever way you want to go. Do you think it should be a range instead? I mean, can you really say this house is worth $250,000, not $251, not $249? I mean, can you really say it's worth $250 only? Do you think it should be a range?
Now, I'm glad you bring that up. That is I think as an industry, and whether it's the lending industry or the appraisal industry, I think we've misled all our customers about the accuracy of an appraisal report. Again, I mentioned earlier, if you send 10 appraisers out to the same property, you're going to get 10 different opinions of value. And depending on how complicated that property is, I think the differences would easily range from 5 to 15%. So this concept of a precise value point is sort of artificially created, but I understand that most people need a number. And mortgage lenders, if they're lending, say, 95% on a certain number, they're not happy with the range. They want a number. Is that number exact? Again, I go back to, God's not an appraiser. This is a human product. It's fallible. There is no precise value.
Yeah, I really think that, if a house comes in at $250 at the appraisal and the lender's trying to lend $252, that should suffice. If it came in at $230, that's a different story. But coming in a few $1,000s difference, you would think that the lender would be okay with that. But instead, they cap it at exactly the amount on the appraisal and won't lend more than that.
Well, it's probably even worse than that. Most lenders are not going to make a 100% loan anyway. So they're going to make, say, a 95% loan or a 90% loan or an 80% loan, whatever that loan is, based on either, and it'd be the lower of the two, contract price or appraised value. So even if a property sold for $250 but appraised for, let's say something kind of a crazy example, that appraised for $300,000, they're still only going to make a loan based on the contract price.
Right. And, right now, lenders give the contracts to the appraisers usually so that they kind of have a guideline of, okay, this is the number we're shooting for. This is what the buyer and seller agreed upon. Do you think that should continue to be done, or do you think that they should not have a copy of that?
That's a new sort of requirement from lenders, and it's required basically. Our appraisal report will state whether or not we were provided with a copy of the contract. We're required to review it if we have a copy. And I will tell you, most lenders will not make a loan on a property that the appraiser has not seen the contract. Does that influence somebody's opinion of value? I have to think it does.
Yeah, I don't see how it couldn't. I mean, you kind of know what number they're shooting for at that point, and you either agree with it or you don't, and either comes in on correctly or low, correctly being market value. Because Theoretically, if a buyer and seller agree on a price, that should be market value.
Assuming, yes, and I agree with you 100%.
In a perfect market, of course.
Yes. Well, a perfect market and no fraud, which there's not that much of. But also assuming that buyer and seller are both, let me back up to the definition of fair market value. It's nothing more complicated than most probable sales price. And that's our goal, is to estimate fair market value. So most probable sales price with some caveats. Assuming neither buyer nor seller under any undue duress. You can clearly understand a seller that needed to get out of a property because he lost a job may sell it for less just to get out from it, so he doesn't get foreclosed upon or something like that. So most probable sales price, neither buyer nor seller under any undue duress. Both are willing, both are knowledgeable and or well-educated, which would be the function of most realtors, because most of us don't really know what our homes are worth. So that's where the realtor comes in. And then the third assumption would be that the property was given adequate marketing capabilities. We put it on MLS. We didn't put a for sale sign in a milk box hidden under the back door, So, contract price is a very good indicator of fair market value, assuming all the parties are above board. And let's also assume that there's no huge concessions made by the seller. They're not giving $6,000 in concessions to the buyer. They're not leaving, say, a boat in the boathouse at a lake property, those sorts of things, because, the buyer may be willing to pay for that, but at the same time, an appraiser and a lender is only making the loan on the real estate.
Sure.
So the only thing I'm appraising is the real estate, not the boat.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you say that because, on our real estate contracts now, we have to put things that are non-real estate on a different addendum. The refrigerators, the swing sets, the above ground pools, things that are left, trampolines. Very interesting. We see fewer appraisal issues in places like California, Nevada, Arizona, because they're doing a large amount of cash transactions. So real quickly before we close, what do you think about the cash transactions? Do you think it's going to be a problem because, really, cash transactions are going to drive up prices? Do you agree?
Well, I don't know about that necessarily. We do an awful lot of appraisals for buyers who are paying cash. Again, they just want to make sure that they're not paying too much for the property. A cash sale, to me, we have a lot of property in Houston, say $500,000 and up. Those tend to be where our cash buyers are. These are folks that have an awful lot of money, and where they place their assets is a decision. Do they invest it? Do they do whatever they might do with it? And right now, if they just want to plow it all into a house, that's a financial decision. I don't know that it impacts prices.
Well, and real estate has always been and continues to be a good real estate, a good financial decision for most people. Real estate tends to be a good place to put your money.
Yes.
We've got to go to a quick break, and we'll be right back with more from Mike Brubaker.